I was made to love people. I was raised to love people. I was born to love people.
I was born to laugh. I learned to laugh through my tears. I was born to love. I'm gonna learn to love without fear. Pour me a glass of wine, talk deep into the night. Who knows what we'll find?
It's been historically difficult for me to let go. People, emotions, the past. I struggle with knowing how to let Jesus people go. How do you let something so inherent to who you are go? What does that even look like? At this point in my life, I've lived outside the commune longer than I have inside it. I also struggle with being that guy who won't shut up about Jesus people. I grew up in a small town. This town, however, was a 10-story building. 2 buildings at one point. Unlike so many people who grew up in small towns, I can't show you around. I can't show you where I went to school, or videos of my plays, Christmas pageants, or my high school graduation. You'll have to just trust me that they happened. All of the video proof of my life in that small town is the property of that town. This town's name is Jpusa, or Jesus People USA Covenant Church. But who are they? Or who were they?
Jesus People USA is a Christian community consisting of about 450 people that live here communally, pool their finances, and have basically caught a vision for inner city missions.
In 2014, I released No Place to Call Home, an hour and 40-minute documentary pulling back the curtain of the very cloistered Christian commune that I was raised in. The process of making that film would stretch into nearly 7 years of my life. 10 years after the release of No Place to Call Home, I'm in a very different place about everything. Initially, I never started out to make a film about child sexual abuse. That was never the film I wanted to make. While there will always be darkness that hangs like a cloud over so many experiences at Jpusa, the goodness of my personal experience has always been the brightest light. Producing and releasing that documentary was so exhausting for me that by the end of it, I had regretted it. I had come to this place where I believed that I had surrendered 7 years of my life to something that left me empty when it was over. I would feel like this until the end of 2016. In the 10 years since the release of the film, much has happened. Every one of the original leaders of Jesus People has stepped down and left the community, with a couple of exceptions. Lawsuits were settled and changes within the walls of Jpusa were implemented and are ongoing. The once 500-member strong community is now a custodial staff of 150 adults. The years-long lawsuit against Jpusa and its umbrella organization, the Evangelical Covenant Church, would be settled. My part in the lawsuit would not be. While I was initially involved to settle with Jpusa for an undisclosed financial sum, I was given a document that I was expected to sign. This document would require me to make a public statement that I'd gotten information in No Place to Call Home wrong. Much of this came at the behest of Johnny Herron, who was determined that any settlement with me also declare him innocent of charges. I refused to sign and was subsequently dropped by 2 sets of lawyers. For the parties that did sign, their ability to discuss their case or their story publicly would become greatly inhibited, with steep fees for any perceived breach of their contract. Not everyone who was a part of the lawsuit settled with Jpusa. John Protaski spent most of his childhood living at Jpusa with his mother and adoptive father. He moved to Jpusa at the age of 7, staying until he was 15. I grew up knowing him as John Company.
Around Thanksgiving of 2016, and Johnny's death was in April of 2017. Well, one day I came home from this. It was kind of an all-night art event, and he'd been up really early, hadn't been able to sleep. I went over to his house in the morning. He was like, "Yeah, I'll make you breakfast," and I'm just kind of sitting there. And he said, "By the way, I was raised in a religious cult and was abused there." I mean, I knew him, and I knew not to even think it was a joke. There's a lot of people who I was like, okay. And that's when he started confiding in me quite a bit about it, and about the lawsuit. Johnny started having a lot of flashbacks of the abuse that happened at Jpusa. And he made me promise I would never tell anyone. He didn't want anyone in our community. I mean, he was a construction worker, you know. People thought he was like a tough guy, kind of, you know. I don't think he knew how much people respected and admired him, because he didn't even know he was handsome. And I mean, his self-esteem was suffering.
John would take his life April 11th, 2017, before the lawsuit would settle. As a further result of the release of No Place to Call Home, lines were drawn in the sand, sides were taken, families were broken, and for some, the trauma deepened. At the bottom of everything is a well of grief, a grief for the home we lost, the family we loved, and the life we all shared. Jpusa historically has never received criticism well. Any kind of criticism they've endured has been seen and experienced as an attack on who they are. Conversely, for so many of us, leaving Jpusa meant you were no longer one of them. This was conditional, as there are many people who have left Jpusa and are able to visit, if they haven't said or supported anything interpreted as damaging or offensive to the community. In late April of 2023, Jpusa posted a barely noticeable link on their official website, finally recognizing the abuse that happened within their walls. After over 50 years, this was the first time the community publicly stated and validated the years of abuse that had gone on under cloud of night. 2 days later, I would receive a personal invitation to meet with the Jpusa leadership. While I remained cautious and wary, I was also really excited that maybe I'd be able to visit my home again. After an icebreaker Zoom call, I agreed to meet with the Jpusa leadership. While I also agreed to not reveal the details of the meeting, what I can say is that I walked away feeling hopeful that a door had been opened for communication. I also walked away realizing that despite the hope I was feeling in the moments leading up to and after my meeting, many others were not feeling that way.
I actually remember it very clearly. I know before we came, it was my mom, my biological dad, and my sister. My mom was very pregnant with my brother, which that part I don't remember. We were staying at another either commune or a cult, something beforehand. There was a lot of people in the house. And I remember my mom said we have to get rid of all our toys, tons of Fisher-Price toys. We had to get rid of all of them. And then the next thing I remember, we were driving in a van, and then we got to this place, a house, and it was the yellow house. And my mom brought me to some room with a bunch of other kids and left. And there was another lady in there who looked like my mom, whose name is Lois Jury. And I always would get confused thinking she was her, but sometimes it made me feel comforted if I saw her, because I was like, oh, there's my mom. So the very first memory was I was, what, 5? I think, maybe younger. And that was my first memory, just going into this room full of kids, and my parents left and I had no toys or no nothing.
What year was this?
I think 79 was when we came. So I was born in 74. So I think I was like 4 or 5, something like that when we came. I didn't really see my parents much. All the children at that point stayed in like the attic of a house across the street from where the parents lived, in like triple bunk beds. And I just don't remember seeing them. I don't know what was going on. Like, I remember just being so confused, like, what's happening? I had lots of nightmares. I would get woken up and spanked for having the nightmares, because I would cry and cry for my mom. I wasn't allowed to cry for her. And at some point, my brother, Aaron, was born. I think that was shortly after she came, but I still didn't see them. I have no memories of my biological dad at Jpusa. Actually, I have one. I remember this is during the Paulina Yellow House days. And I remember at one point I was allowed to go to their room, I think it might have been, like where they were living, which was across the street from where all the kids stayed at the Yellow House. And I remember eating coffee beans with him out of a ball jar. And that was like a good memory. And I remember, that's the only thing I remember of my dad at Jpusa. When I was 5, I don't know, this is either right when we moved from Paulina or right before we moved to Malden. It was like right around the transition point. And my dad left. It was my mom, my sister Naomi, my brother Aaron, and myself. My dad left. I was told he was listening to the devil. He was listening to Satan. I was brought to a lady who I thought was my grandmother at the time. Her name was Jerry Dixler, and I only have mostly good memories of her as a child. She gave me this, I clearly remember this vision. It was a red tumbler cup with milk, which I'm highly allergic to dairy, but I hated milk when I was a kid, probably because I'm allergic to it. And she put Ovaltine in it to make it taste better. So that was like a love thing that she did. And she gave it to me, and she's like, so your dad left. He decided to listen to Satan and leave you guys. And so I remember I just was crying and crying, where is my dad? I want my dad. And because of that, she said, I was also listening to Satan because I was wanting to be with somebody who was not serving the Lord. So I was taken away from my mom. I don't remember my mom telling me anything. I think she like brought me to Jerry at that point, and that's all I remember. And from then on, I was not taken care of by my mother. And I would see her in passing sometimes. I wasn't allowed to talk to her. I wasn't allowed to talk to my brother or my sister. I had no idea. All I knew is I wasn't doing the right thing, so I was listening to Satan.
We were close, but I don't feel like they raised me. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like,
I feel the same way about mine.
yeah, I feel like we were raised by the ministry, but I was there with my parents. But maybe that's a lot of the things too that I wanted to leave, because I remember like we wanted to get our ears pierced. All my cousins had their ears pierced, and my mom would have let me, but it was we have to ask kind of thing. And I remember thinking, you're my parents. Why are we asking someone else? But yeah, my mom had more structure, or, than other kids' parents there. Like, we had a bedtime, we had the family night like, I was able to just kind of roam the hallways and run and play with everybody else, but then she would kind of reel us in. So I felt like, yeah, I was there with my parents, and she did provide some, like, we used to go on drives a lot and just to get out, I think, and we would still go visit family and stuff. So I felt like they were my parents, especially when we were out. But there, I didn't feel like they were directly involved in raising me. It sounds crazy, but yeah.
The community raised so many of us. The way systems were set up, the community was our family, and I loved so much of it. Whenever I watch Almost Famous, I think about my days at Jpusa and how wonderful many aspects of that life was. There's a specific scene when the characters in the film find themselves at the Continental Hyatt House in Los Angeles. The moment the camera moves through the hallways of the hotel remind me of what kind of magic was afoot at Jpusa at any given time. I laugh fondly when I remember the musical movie Jpusa made in the late 80s. Many are called and few can stand it, an idyllic oversimplification of the history of Jpusa, filmed when the community lived at the Malden Street and Magnolia Street houses. The dichotomy of growing up the way we did is that as much magic as there might have been in moments, there was also just as much fear. I've compared M. Night Shyamalan's The Village to elements of growing up in Jesus People. While we did not live in a town in the middle of a wooded park, we were certainly raised to be afraid of the outside world and those who were exposed to it.
I remember my therapist was like, she apologized to me for everything I had been through. And I remember thinking, why is she apologizing to me? Like, I don't think I really thought that I had been through anything. And I think finally I was able to say that to myself, like, yeah, you went through something and it's okay. Like, instead of just trying to tuck it away and hide it away. And I think it just built up. But I think once I was able to kind of acknowledge that, yeah, I was hurt, I was able to move on.
What were you hurt by?
So when we graduated high school, I came out here to California to visit, and growing up, we weren't allowed to date. We weren't told anything. It was just, no, you can, and not even date. What was it called when they would, when you're happening with someone, like, and I almost had fears of, like, I don't want to grow up and, like, all of a sudden, yeah, I've got to be happening with some person I might not, like, but anyway, I came out here and got a boyfriend and lost my virginity, basically. And I went back and I told a friend, and it got out. And I remember I was down in the lobby, and Ron Brown came and got me. And he was like, hey, Samantha, can we talk for a minute? And I was like, sure. So I follow him back up to him and Marg's room. And he opens the door, and it's Marguerite, Catherine Williams, I think Sandy Ramsey, my parents, who are crying. And I remember thinking, oh, they know. So they asked me, basically, I told them, and I was supposed to leave like in a month or so to go back to college. I'd gotten a scholarship. And basically they told me that I was not well, that I couldn't leave, that I needed to stay and have like intense therapy, counseling, I don't know. I was gonna be taken out of my parents' family and put in, I had a choice of going with Cynthia Kale's family or Eric and Diane Bixler. And I chose Eric and Diane. I used to babysit for them. So I went with them. But it was just upsetting. Like, all of a sudden, like, your plans for your life are put on hold. And I felt like, oh, wow, I've done a horrible thing. Like, you feel dirty, you feel shame, you feel a lot. And I remember asking them, or I remember saying, like, can we please not tell? I don't want everyone else to know. And they were like, it won't leave this room. The next day, I go down to the lobby, and Mindy Taylor, we were really close. And she comes running up to me like, oh my God, Samantha, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, what? And she pulled me into that downstairs bathroom, and she was like, oh, Catherine Williams sat all of the high school girls down and told them, like, Samantha's going through a hard time, like, and I remember all these, like her, Tiana, like a bunch of girls were like, so wait, you went and slept with a bunch of different men and da da da, and I was like, what? No. And then like instantly my life was changed. I was not allowed to hang out with any high school aged kids. I was a kid. I had just graduated. I didn't know anyone else. I grew up there. It's not like I went there and made friends. So all the adults that were like the young adult female women, like I don't know them. I was a kid. So all of a sudden I couldn't talk with anybody. I was an adult.
Legal adult, and they're
technically, yeah. Yeah. What bothered me the most was that my parents, I remember they were crying and I was angry. Like, why are you crying? Sorry. Yeah, I think I just wanted them to fight for me or stand up for me. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I think that bothered me the most.
Accounts of growing up in Jpusa will differ significantly. It is important to fully understand the complexity of life as a child at Jpusa. Some of what we experienced depended upon your family's standing in the community. If you were a leader's child, your experience would sometimes be vastly different than rank-and-file members' children. For many kids, they would experience being taken from their parents and put in different families, in some cases on rotation.
At 12, my mom had a stroke. So there is a big square dance, one of our unconventional things we got to do, where the males and females can mix. It was a big deal. Like the whole Jpusa, we had a big party. We all went to this dance. I was so excited. My mom was really sick for like 3 days. She was in her bed. I didn't know why. She didn't really get sick that often. I think she's just really stressed. Like I have come to find out that stress causes strokes. I've been really stressed out these last couple of years. I almost had a stroke in February. I think it was February. It was really crazy. And I have to like learn to de-stress. So I think that's probably what happened to my mom. Her children are getting beat. Her son wanted to commit suicide. We get moved to like the lowest part of the low at Jpusa because Jpusa was very like hierarchical, and we were very on the bottom because it was a single parent, special needs, and behavior issues, and a loud stepfather. So we were on the bottom. So my mom, she came to the square dance. Thanks to me, I begged her to come because I had a new dress that I think Marguerite might have made for me. And I wanted my mom to come. I begged and begged and begged. I was like sobbing, begging her to come. She came and she had the stroke at the dance. Had she had the stroke at home, nobody would have known because Dwayne didn't really give any fucks about her, at least from what I saw. I'm not sure if he did or not. I don't know. So she came and had the stroke. And I didn't see it happen. I know a lot of my siblings, Jpusa kids, I call them my siblings. A lot of you guys saw it. I didn't see it. And I don't know, maybe I went to the bathroom. I remember I came back and everybody's like, go upstairs, go upstairs, go upstairs. Just because my home life was so bad. So there's a family, the Browns, that took care of me a lot. I was with them maybe more than my own family. And they have 3 girls that are my age, and they have a younger boy, but he wasn't born at that point, or maybe he was a baby. I don't remember. I didn't know what was going on. Nobody would tell me. They're like, you're going to stay with the Brown girls tonight. That was a normal thing. So I didn't I didn't question that. Like anytime there's a big event, I usually did stay with them. It just was what I did. I was with them on a lot of holidays. I don't know. They were just my second family. So they're like, you're going to stay at the Brown girls tonight. And then I'm like, well, where's my mom? They're like, oh, she fainted. They had to bring her to the doctors. And the whole Jpusa is like quiet. This is where my journey begins of the families. So at some point I end up getting put in a different family, but on the same floor. So as you move families, your names change, which means your identity changes. So all growing up, I never felt like I had an identity. I felt like I never had a home because I was transitioned from place to place to place to place. I felt homeless my entire life.
Jpusa's practice of removing kids from their biological families was something that continued through the late 1990s. When my brother was 12 years old, a request was put in to take him from my parents and place him in another family. This request came despite my parents and the predominantly African American families who had moved in from a Southside community being given assurance that none of their children would be removed from their care. You're moving from family to family eventually. Is the state or is the DCFS involved in your custody at all? Are they?
No.
Did Jpusa involve any outside agency for you?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No.
So you were with the Browns for a long time, and then what happens after that?
Okay, so I was, and well, this will be my second family because I was with the Bixlers for a while, and then the Browns, and then my family kind of, and then the Browns. So then after that, I got moved to another family, LaShawn and Paul Mackey. So LaShawn was my counselor, if you will, which meant I had to journal everything that I was feeling or things that happened in the week, and I would come back and get reprimanded for everything negative, bad feelings, anything. And then they would turn it around and Christianize it. Like, here's some Bible verses. Why don't you memorize these? Why don't you write these down? These should help you live by these Bible verses. So I was never really helped. Like, I tried to get help, but it just didn't work. So my mom was still alive at this point. She had her stroke. She was in a wheelchair. She couldn't take care of me. She came out of the coma in a wheelchair. I was told I couldn't go back with them. My baby brother, we did backtrack. My mom had another kid. He's 10 years younger than me, Dwayne, and my mom. He stayed with them because Dwayne was the biological father. Dwayne really couldn't take care of 3 kids. I was defiant of him being my father. And then my sister had severe needs and my brother had severe needs. So we all basically went to different families after my mom had her stroke.
And again, there was no local agency involved?
No local agency and no really explaining to us. It was just like, you're bad, so you're going to be with this family. You're too bad for your stepdad to take care of you. You're going to make it worse for your mom. No, this was all like done within Jpusa. And they would scare you into, well, if you don't behave here, you're going to have to move to a different family.
In 1989, after a long ECC Central Conference application and vetting process, Jpusa was voted into membership of the Evangelical Covenant Church at their annual meeting. According to people there that day, it was not unanimous. This membership opened new opportunities for access to capital through denominational loans and credit to support expanded ministry through the purchase of real estate, properties, or renovation. Membership also extended legitimacy to the overall Jpusa ministry, since it was now connected to a larger and historic evangelical denomination. In order to join with the Evangelical Covenant Church, or the ECC, Jpusa would have to adopt a set of bylaws per standard procedure. These bylaws would help to structure or restructure the community as a place where there are safety protocols in place and accountability for those in leadership. A copy of the ECC's bylaws were given to the former leaders of Jpusa to adapt and adopt. And the leadership essentially declined those recommendations, opting to make subtle and marginal changes to their power structure, ensuring that they retain most of the power and control of the community. While the bylaws would not have addressed all of the issues that were plaguing Jpusa, they would have perhaps put in place safeguards that would have protected generations to come and the generations growing up within the community at the time. And the Covenant Church said, okay.
But when I came back, I was about to go into 11th grade. I was told I was not allowed to talk to any siblings, any Jpusa kids. I wasn't allowed to talk to any of them. I lived in a room with her. I wasn't allowed to talk to her, even though we lived in a room together.
Did you go to school with them, but you couldn't talk to them?
No, I wasn't allowed to go to school. I was kicked out of school. To this day, I don't know why. They never told me. I cried. It might be because I was in the real world and they were scared of the influence I might bring back. Even though at that stage, I still didn't know fuck was the 4-letter word. I didn't know about sex. I didn't know anything about sex. I never even had feelings. I didn't know anything. So somehow I don't know. I don't know why they, at that.
Did you graduate early?
I didn't graduate. They forced me to drop out. Yeah. I became an adult. I was fucking 15, I became an adult. What else did I do? Cook in the kitchen, work in the daycare, take care of kids. It was just a nightmare. So at some point, I come back, I'm scared I'm going to jail, Cook County Jail, for stealing 4 quarters to go to school, and I didn't know I was really stealing them. My aunt wouldn't give them to me the night before, and I had to go They know I was stealing them, so I thought I'm going to jail. Come back, my mom hates me. I know my mom didn't hate me. They kept on telling me that. Like, it was my fault that she had the stroke. So, because of the stress, because strokes come from stress. I caused the stress. I caused her to have a stroke. Maybe I did. I'm the one that asked 100 questions. But I became an adult, and they just were like, this is your schedule. They handwritten on a piece of paper, hung it up on the door. Be downstairs senior servant at 7 a.m. tomorrow, or 6 a.m., whatever time it was.
So were you persuaded to get your GED? Did they say you need to get your GED?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a whole other story. You want me to say that now? Okay, so I did know my education was important. I really always knew that it was going to be my key, my ticket out, but I didn't know how. I didn't know about a GED at that point. I was really sad I couldn't graduate. I later found out, as soon as I found out about a GED, I started to pursue to get that. That was years later. I'll get to that later, but I will say this. When the council found out I was going to Truman College, a city college, on my own time to get my GED, to go to GED classes, because I never wrote a paper. I didn't know anything. Like, literally, I was stupid. I didn't know. I didn't know what evolution was. We weren't taught it. We had like fake Bible stories for social studies. We didn't know shit. So I had to sign a contract that had to be witnessed by pastors. And this was not the first contract I had to sign. I signed many contracts that I would not go and get my GED, that I would drop out. And it had to be witnessed. I mean, I signed it and I still went. Because I wasn't gonna, I still went and I got my GED. This is one of the hardest things of my life, the hardest parts of my life, and I don't think I've ever talked about it. So all my friends, I'm hearing them, I can't talk to them. Ariel, my best friend, where are you gonna move? And I'm watching her become friends with this new girl, Ann Osborne. She needed a friend, I'm happy, but it just was like hurtful, like I'm losing my best friend. They put my stuff in clear garbage bags and put me in some fucking room with sorry. Nothing. There's some room with like roaches, no locks. People come in, no bathroom, no nothing. I'm living out of garbage bags with a pallet on the floor for months, for the longest time. And this lady made friends with me. She was like disabled. I think she had cerebral palsy with maybe slight cognitive delays. I loved her so much. Her name is Janet Toomey. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know. She literally saved my life and she doesn't know it. So my mom, during this time when I'm literally living out of garbage bags in this room, I don't have a shower. I don't know how to clean myself. I'm not allowed to ask people to use their showers. Like, they would get mad at me. So I had to go on a senior floor with these like scary, basically old homeless people that smell really bad and just go find a shower to use. Like, it was horrible. And all my friends are like, look at my room, look at this. My mom and dad. My mom's still alive. My baby brother has this room with his friends, and I'm like in this living room with doors that don't close. Like, it's fucking scary. I'm a kid. It was horrible.
In the research for this documentary, what I keep circling are the number of people who sought the Evangelical Covenant Church over and over and over, and they did nothing. There is a book of correspondence between concerned members of Jesus People and their umbrella denomination, the Evangelical Covenant Church. Passionate words written about concerns for what was going on inside of Jpusa, and the ECC opted to do nothing. On August 22, 2023, I met with 3 leaders of Jpusa for a 2-hour meeting in Chicago. This was something I had hoped would happen for a long time. I went in feeling like real change would start to take place and that hearts and minds were softening. I was and continue to be hopeful. In September of 2023, I met up to interview my fellow Jpusa sibling, Owen Johnson. Owen has been speaking with the current leaders of Jpusa to enact change for the past 3 years. Obviously, it's been 10 years since I released No Place to Call Home, which was obviously a documentary about sexual abuse, but was also a documentary about how Jpusa was set up in some ways. And since that time, a lot has changed. there a lot. Most of the leaders are gone. The ones that we're talking about now, or at least the life that we're talking about now between us, that Jpusa is gone. How?
You say that Jpusa is gone, and I haven't been there. I've talked to these people that are there now that says it's changed and that old way is gone. And I don't believe that. I could say, well, because those people are gone, it's different. Those people that are gone taught the people that are there how they did it. And those people that are there are still doing it that way. And in the last 4 years I've been talking to them, they have not shown me any kind of evidence of what they say has changed, of how they say it's changed. They've said like, oh, we have these guidelines, we have these protocols. They should have had those all the time. I think it's still the same, that they're still behaving the way that they were, as far as it's still a cult. They still are behaving in that way, in my experience of talking with them.
So who is Jpusa today?
Hi, we'd like to welcome you to Jesus People USA.
Jpusa is an intentional Christian community that lives in the uptown neighborhood of Chicago.
The community is made up of a wide variety of members who have come together to share life, faith, and resources with one another.
The goal is to live out our Christian faith in a communal setting, to disciple one another towards a deeper understanding of God, and to serve and minister to the poor in our city.
There have been many changes implemented at Jpusa over the last 10 years. What concerns me is that despite some promising steps forward on the part of the Jpusa leadership to work towards reconciliation and restoration, they have not publicly as a community distanced themselves from the legacy leadership whose policies and practices were the cause of so much of the harm and abuse that happened there for so long. While most of the old leadership have either left, stepped down, and passed away, some remain in the community without leadership titles. To add insult to injury, so many of us who grew up at Jpusa are not welcome there. In 1990, during the years of my isolation, I was at Jpusa's farm in Doniphan, Missouri. The farm was a 150-acre property located in the forests of Doniphan, Missouri. In the 1970s, Jpusa bought the land and built a 14-room lodge, as well as cared for a myriad of farm animals until the property was sold in the early 2000s. One morning, I remember seeing a car pull up and a man named Larry gets out and retrieves his suitcase from the trunk. I turned to Jerry Bixler in excitement that there was another person there, and Jerry's response was, "This is not a good thing." I didn't know what she was talking about. The former leaders of Jpusa allowed Larry to leave quietly and go to one of their properties where a 14-year-old boy and a young girl were living at the time. They gave an admitted child abuser safe harbor when he should have been kicked out. These are the same leaders that were allowed to quietly slip away or step down without answering for any of the past decisions they had made. While there's been a general admission of harm done inside the walls of Jpusa, there's not been any ownership of blame. It would be easy to place all blame for failures in Jpusa's leadership structure and community practices solely on the former Council of Elders. That would in fact be a mistake. It took a community to raise us. It took a community of people to collectively turn their heads when something alarmed them. It took a community of parents to give up their responsibilities and decision-making powers over their children. It took a community to observe what was happening and do nothing. The current Jpusa leadership has implemented a system whereby those who experience harm at Jpusa can go to a web portal, write their story, and send it away to a stranger to read and assess. This process feels like information gathering more than it does actual reconciliation. If reconciliation and restoration are going to happen, an entire community, including some who have left, will have to agree to it, and not just 3 leaders. In 1992, I would screen Merchant Ivory's Howard's End, a film set in Edwardian period England. The story at its heart is about the importance of home. When I was back in Chicago in August of 2023, the closest I could get to my childhood home was a view from the street. In 2024, I found myself in England, staring at the house that's inspired my dreams all of my adult life. I was only afforded a street view as I could not enter. Looking back now, how does that history sit with you, knowing that one of those groups continues on, and some offshoots in other countries? You and Jim at the time really inspired. You hear stories, and of course there's goodness mixed in with so much of this. How do you reminisce about that today? And oftentimes, as people get older, you just kind of want to enjoy life more, so you only tend to think about the good. But with the Jesus movement and your community and what your community started and who it attracted and the complication of all of that and the lives affected positively, negatively, how does that sit with you today?
If I'd had this question a few months ago, I'd say, well, I'm glad that we didn't keep on going. That when the Jesus movement died in '74 almost abruptly, so did we for other reasons. I do have a lot to say about systems that become rigid and no longer mobile, no longer fluid. I had no home. And there's many churches I've been to. I had no home. And I found myself a home. So God's still at it. God's still at it. And I have hope. I have a lot of hope.
That's awesome. Me too. Home is important. Home is everything. What I now understand is that number one, I can only heal myself. And number two, if a community of people who profess to be followers of Jesus states that they want to walk towards a larger sense of healing and restoration with many of the children who grew up there, everyone will have a part to play. Years ago, during the beginnings of my production for No Place to Call Home, I naively set out to make a film that might help heal a church. That is still my hope.
In the place my wonder comes from, there I find you. Your face shines in my sky, in your heart where the world comes from, there you will find me. Your eyes dance in my mind,